December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. Smoke rises over the Pacific like a dark curtain closing on an old world. In Washington, men in pressed uniforms stare at maps that stretch from Hawaii to the Philippines and realize something horrifying. They don't just lack warships. They lack shelter. Across the Pacific from Wake Island to Guam, American troops are living in canvas tents that dissolve under tropical rain. 3 weeks into the war, those same tents are moldy, collapsing, and half their occupants are in hospitals with pneumonia. The War Department's morning briefings read like obituaries: soaked ammunition, flooded supply depots, sick soldiers sleeping in mud. The enemy isn't always Japanese. Sometimes it's weather. Traditional wooden barracks take skilled carpenters months of work, and wood that doesn't exist on Coral Islands. The Navy calculates that permanent housing for all Pacific troops would take 18 months. 18 months. When men are dying today, Brigadier General Eugene Raybould stands before a crisis table buried in maps, construction timetables, and meteorological charts. His voice is calm, but his order is brutal. Design me a building that can be shipped by rail, built by sailors with no training, stand against typhoons, and cost less than $1,000. The engineers stare at him. That building doesn't exist. Not yet. Across the Atlantic, the British think they have an answer. Quonset huts, semicircular steel shelters invented during World War I. They've survived sandstorms in North Africa, housed troops through the Blitz, and can be assembled by unskilled labor. But when American engineers study the blueprints, they see the flaws instantly. The British huts are too heavy, too hot, and need concrete foundations. Steel that works in Libya turns into a rusting oven in the Philippines. The math becomes terrifying. 2 million men across hundreds of islands. At the current construction rate, the war would end before half of them had a roof over their heads. Field letters start to paint the picture nobody wants to read. We wake up with our boots full of rainwater. Fungus grows on our uniforms overnight. These tents collapse in every storm. We sleep in the mud until morning. Respiratory infections are hospitalizing. More men than enemy bullets. The problem isn't comfort, it's survival. So the call goes out to engineering firms, universities, and naval architects across America. Build the impossible. Create a structure light as a jeep, shippable across 10,000 miles of hostile ocean, strong enough to face a typhoon, and simple enough for exhausted sailors to build with wrenches. It's February 1942, and in a warehouse at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, a group of engineers is about to make history. The experiment. The team is led by Otto Brandenberger, a farm-building engineer from Pennsylvania who knows how to make steel barns stand through tornadoes. His first decision breaks every architectural rule in the book. No wood. No internal frame. The skin itself must carry the load. He sketches a perfect half circle on the board, 16 feet wide, 20 feet long per section, the maximum width that fits on a standard rail car. He calls it self-supporting architecture. Every curve has a purpose. The arch deflects wind instead of fighting it. The corrugated steel strengthens itself like a folded spring. Every bolt distributes tension equally through the structure. The result is something entirely new. An all-steel tunnel that doesn't need foundations, beams, or carpenters. But theory isn't enough. The Navy gives Brandenberger's team 60 days to design, build, and test a prototype. They turn the warehouse into a laboratory. Engineers sleep on cots between piles of failed joints and bent metal sheets. They sketch in the morning, fabricate in the afternoon, test at night. The air smells like zinc, sweat, and desperation. And slowly, something begins to take shape. By May 1942, the first full-scale model stands under the Rhode Island sky. 96 corrugated steel panels bolted into a gleaming silver arch. The team watches as 6 sailors, trained for just a few hours, assemble the entire building in 14 hours. Not perfect, but close. Too slow for the Navy's demands. They want it done in 1 day. So Brandenberger cuts the design again, removes the wooden floor, simplifies the joints, reduces total weight by 200 pounds. Next test, 8 hours. The Quonset Hut is born, June 10, 1942. The prototype faces its first real trial. A simulated typhoon test. Wind machines roar against the arch. Rain hammers the steel. Gauges record every vibration. The hut flexes, groans, and holds. The semicircular shape sheds the wind like water off a stone. No cracks, no leaks. A new kind of building has arrived. One that doesn't resist nature. It cooperates with it. Engineers realize something profound. This isn't just shelter. It's logistics turned architecture. A system designed not by architects but by necessity. And it works. Production begins that summer. Factories in Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Ohio stop making farm silos and start rolling out Quonset panels. Rail cars leave every day for the West Coast, bound for the war. Each kit, 9,000 pounds of galvanized steel, packed flat like a giant puzzle. Each one a promise. 36 men will have a roof tomorrow. On Guadalcanal, a storm is brewing. Not of rain, but of war. Within weeks, those same silver arches will stand between life and death for men who've never heard the name Quonset Point. February 1942. Snow falls quietly over Rhode Island, blanketing Quonset Point in a thin white sheet that glows under the floodlights of a Navy warehouse. Inside, the air is anything but calm. 30 engineers stand around a long drafting table littered with blueprints, coffee-stained napkins, and bent steel samples. Otto Brandenberger, a broad-shouldered man with the kind of intensity that never quite fades even after 40 sleepless hours, slams his hand on the table. "Forget the wood," he says. "It dies in the jungle before the men even get sick. That single decision, scrapping wood entirely, will define one of the most influential structures ever built." The room falls silent for a moment, as if everyone understands that what's being decided here isn't just a new kind of hut, but a new philosophy of building. The task before them is ridiculous. Design a building that weighs less than a jeep, assembles without foundation or skilled labor, costs under $1,000, and survives typhoons, monsoons, and artillery fire. Oh, and do it in 60 days. Brandenberger divides his exhausted team into small groups. One for structural calculations, one for ventilation, one for packaging and transport. The engineers abandon traditional drafting. Instead, they adopt a frantic rhythm. Draw it in the morning, build it by noon, test it overnight. Failures pile up like corpses of ideas. Steel joints twist, bolts shear off, panels collapse under stress. But every failure teaches something. A young naval engineer named Claire Winslow, one of the few women in the program, proposes a bold experiment. What if the skin carries the load? She suggests. No frame, no skeleton. The steel is the structure. It's heresy in 1942 architecture. But the logic is flawless. Corrugated steel, curved into an arch, distributes forces evenly. The more pressure it takes, the stronger it becomes. Brandenberger smiles for the first time in days. By mid-March, the prototype starts to take shape. 16 feet wide, 48 feet long. A perfect semicircular cross-section. The corrugations, ridges pressed into each steel panel, act like tiny beams, multiplying the strength-to-weight ratio. The team runs load simulations using chalk and slide rules. Wind at 100 miles per hour? It flexes 2 inches. Snow load at 40 pounds per square foot? No collapse. The numbers make sense, but the real test will be in the field. April 15, 1942. The first full-scale prototype rises inside the Quonset Point warehouse. The men, half delirious from lack of sleep, stand back as the last bolt tightens. The structure gleams under the floodlights like a silver whale. 6 sailors are brought in from the nearby naval base. They're handed wrenches, a printed instruction sheet, and one order: build it. 14 hours later, the hut stands complete. It's crude, with sharp edges and unpolished joints, but it holds. Brandenberger circles the problem areas in red pencil. Too slow, he says. The Navy needs one-day assembly. They're still trying to include a wooden floor. But the floor is the bottleneck, slow to install, quick to rot. Then we lose the floor, Winslow says. The idea feels absurd at first. Buildings without floors. But it's the breakthrough. Eliminating the base cuts weight, time, and cost. The hut can now stand directly on dirt, coral, or sand. The structure doesn't care what's beneath it. By June, the final prototype stands, 96 galvanized steel panels, each weighing less than 50 pounds, bolted together into a gleaming half-cylinder of resilience. No wood, no concrete, no nonsense, so when the Navy's inspection team arrives, they try everything short of explosives. They blast it with wind machines. They cover it in snow. They hit it with water cannons. The arch flexes, then returns to shape. No leaks, no fractures. Then comes the Panama test. One prototype is shipped to the canal zone to face real humidity and heat. After 6 months, it comes back covered in condensation marks, but still solid. The engineers add ventilation louvers, small openings along the ridge and end walls, to release hot air and moisture. It's the last piece of the puzzle. The Quonset Hut, named after the very base where it was born, is proved for production on June 10, 1942. The industrial rollout is unlike anything seen before. The U.S. War Production Board greenlights contracts with 10 major steel manufacturers across the Midwest and Northeast. Factories that once made water tanks, car parts, and farm silos are retooled overnight. Each hut kit includes everything: the 96 panels, pre-drilled end walls, hardware boxes, and illustrated instructions that even a sleep-deprived private can follow. The panels nest together like spoons, 48 feet of building packed into a 14-inch high crate. One hut fits perfectly on a single flatbed rail car. Within 2 months, assembly lines are humming. Sparks fly as molten zinc coats each panel in galvanization baths at 850 degrees, protecting the steel from rust. The smell of oil, metal, and adrenaline fills the air. Trains loaded with hut kits thunder west toward San Francisco, Seattle, and San Diego, where Liberty ships wait to carry them across the Pacific. At peak, American factories produce 1,500 huts per week. By the end of 1943, they're turning out more than 8,000 a month. On a beach in Guadalcanal, the true test begins. Marines unload the crates under artillery fire. The ground is mud, the air thick with diesel and salt. 6 men open a single box, unfold the panels, and start bolting. By nightfall, a gleaming arch stands where there was nothing that morning. 3 days later, a Japanese bomb detonates 40 yards away. The blast wave flattens the surrounding jungle and tears canvas tents to shreds. The Quonset Hut flexes, rattles, but stays standing. Inside, every man survives. Word spreads fast. The huts go up in New Guinea, Saipan, Tarawa, and Iwo Jima. They become machine shops, field hospitals, radio posts, chapels, mess halls, morgues, and command centers. When Typhoon Cobra hits in 1944, leveling 80% of the base at Tacloban in the Philippines, 39 out of 43 Quonset huts remain intact. The 4 that fail? Poor anchoring. Lesson learned. Every bolt matters. By 1945, over 160,000 huts are deployed across the globe, housing nearly 6 million soldiers, each one built in a day, at 1/10 the cost of traditional barracks. In the quiet after victory, the huts linger. Bases shut down, but the structures remain. They've become more than shelters. They're icons of efficiency, resilience, and speed. When returning soldiers can't find homes in America's post-war housing crisis, the government starts selling surplus huts for $1,000 each. Families buy them, paint them, and turn them into homes. Churches hold services inside them. Schools teach baby boomers under curved roofs once meant for war. Farmers store grain and tractors in them. From Rhode Island to the Pacific, the same arch keeps rising. Not for war anymore, but for life. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the world stood among ruins. Cities burned, empires collapsed, and millions of soldiers began the long road home. Yet scattered across every continent stood the same silent witness, the Quonset Hut. Its curved steel skin, dented and scarred by battle, had outlived the war itself. For the men who had lived inside them, who had written letters under the hum of rain on corrugated metal, who had patched wounds and buried friends, these huts were more than buildings. They were memories forged in steel. In post-war America, something unexpected happened. The government, now sitting on tens of thousands of surplus huts, began auctioning them off. The price? Around $1,000, cheap enough for a returning GI with a new family and a dream. All across the country, Quonset huts were reborn. They became schools, churches, diners, factories, and homes. A few were even turned into art studios by young veterans studying under the GI Bill. The same structures that once sheltered war became the skeleton of a reborn One of the most famous transformations took place in Los Angeles, where a group of architects reimagined the hut as modern housing. They called it the People's Architecture. Affordable, modular, honest. In Seattle, the first Quonset-style college dormitories appeared. In Hawaii, entire neighborhoods grew from the surplus. By the early 1950s, the Quonset Hut wasn't just a wartime relic. It was a symbol of adaptation, resilience, and the American spirit itself. But the story doesn't end there. In Korea, Quonset Huts once again became the backbone of temporary bases. In Vietnam, they returned, slightly modified, coated with camouflage paint and fitted with air conditioning vents. Soldiers joked that you could tell where America went. Just look for the arch of steel in the jungle. By the late 20th century, these humble buildings had circled the globe. In Africa, aid groups used them as hospitals. In Alaska, they became weather stations and remote research outposts. In South America, missionaries built schools inside them. Even in Antarctica, the same simple shape, the half-cylinder, stood against the coldest winds on Earth. It was proof of an idea that outlived its creators, that strength doesn't have to be complicated. Today, more than 80 years after the first hut was built, thousands still stand. Some are rusty, their bolts loose and panels faded by time. Others have been restored, shining silver in sunlight, serving as breweries, cafes, art galleries, or storage for the very equipment that explores Mars. Yes, NASA engineers studying habitats for the Moon and Mars cited the Quonset Hut as an early inspiration for their designs. A shape that once sheltered soldiers could one day protect astronauts. The arch of survival continues its journey beyond Earth. There's something poetic about that. A design born out of desperation, now pointing toward the stars. But perhaps the most powerful part of this story isn't the steel, or the design, or even the survival. It's the people, the men and women who designed it. Brandenburger, Winslow, and hundreds of nameless workers never sought fame. They were problem solvers in a time of chaos. They proved that even in war, creation can coexist with destruction, that a tool of war can evolve into a home, a classroom, or a chapel. Each Quonset Hut, wherever it stands today, is a quiet reminder. The same hands that build weapons can also build shelter. There's an old photograph from 1943. 6 soldiers standing in front of a freshly built hut in the Solomon Islands. They're muddy, smiling, exhausted. Someone scrawled a message across the back of the photo. Built it in a day. Slept safe that night. That simple sentence captures the entire story. Not of steel, but of survival, ingenuity, and the unbreakable will to make something that lasts. Even now, in forgotten corners of old airfields and rural farmlands, you can find those same arches half buried under vines and rust. They stand like fossils of an age when humanity learned that the best way to endure chaos is to build something that refuses to fall. So next time you see one of those curved steel huts, maybe while driving past an old industrial park or hidden behind a field, remember what it represents. It's not just a shelter. It's not just history. It's proof that simplicity, when born from necessity, can change the world. If you felt something while listening to this story, if you could almost hear the rain on the steel, or imagine the soldiers laughing in the mud, take a second right now. Tell me in the comments, had you ever seen one of these huts before? Maybe in your city, maybe in an old photo, maybe even in your family's past. I read every single one. Give this video a like. It really helps this story reach more people who love history like you do. And don't forget to subscribe to WW2 Struggles, because next week, we're diving into another unbelievable story, the secret train beneath Berlin. Until then, remember, history isn't just in books. Sometimes it's standing right in front of you, made of steel still unbroken.